All right, well, welcome everybody to the initial kickoff for the Cascade Locks Downtown Revitalization Plan Steering Committee. That's a mouthful.
It is.
We'll start with quick introductions, if that works. I am Jordan Bennett, the city administrator for Cascade Locks. I've been here for about 20 months now.
Great. I am Amanda Ferguson, and I am a career faculty member at the University of Oregon for the Institute for Policy Research and Engagement. And my specialty is public policy and planning. And I am the consultant who is going to be working with you through this project.
Great, I'm Dan DeJarna, run Bike to Gorge, which is a bike rental and bike shop within Cascade Locks.
And Tan when at the owner hotel currently involved in and the restaurant next door not open yet.
I'm Sarah Lingley. I'm the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area Coordinator for Oregon Department of Transportation. I'm also a planning contact for ODOT in River County.
I'm Nate Stice. I'm Governor Kodak's Regional Solutions lead for the Columbia Gorge area and an alum of the 3 p.m. program at the University of Oregon and friends with Josh Bruce.
Nice. I will tell Josh that I saw it. I was delighted.
How mindful.
Denise Emily Baker, city councilor, the president of the newly formed affiliated Main Street that we became affiliated in January. We're connected communities for a year before that. And I'm the MCED board liaison, I suppose is the term, replacing Councilman Butch Miller, who had to step down for health reasons for this term, and been in Cascade Locks almost 4 years and excited to see this come to fruition. Thank you all for traveling a long way to be here. Thank you.
Would invite folks in.
Yep, Emily?
Hi, I am Emily. I've been a resident of Cascade Locks since 2021. I'm the chair of the tourism committee here and also the secretary for our Main Street board.
Gabby?
Hi, I'm Gabby. I'm working with Amanda as an intern on this project and just supporting her in any way I can.
Dave, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm Dave Lips, and my wife and I are the owners of Thunder Island Brewing, and we've lived in town 11 years now. And I will be in that room. I just have to drop something off to my wife.
Angie?
Hey everyone, I'm Angie Brewer. I am the Central Oregon Regional Representative from the Department of Land Conservation and Development, Community Services Division. I think I'm just listening in. I don't know that I'm a formal member of the steering committee, am I? Or am I? Do I get to be?
Not a formal member. You, Tara, and Nate are ex officio. You were.
That sounds great.
We're tagging.
Yeah, I can't afford any of this, so you guys are paying for it, and that's why you're here, so.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you letting me watch from afar. I'm based in Bend, so I wasn't able to get up there today, but thank you for letting me tap in this way.
I will note that this is all possible because of a grant from DLCD. We were awarded $45,000 from them to do this for projects. And then last is Jeremiah.
Jeremiah Blue, I'm the executive director with the Port of Cascade Locks. Apologize I couldn't be there today. I am traveling for a conference, but glad to zoom in.
Thanks for joining.
May I just add, I'm a resident in downtown Cascade Locks as well as Emily is a downtown resident, and I have a consulting business based in downtown Cascade Locks, so I have that downtownness as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for being here. I know that some of us had to travel a little bit, but anytime we can be in person, I will try to be for these meetings moving forward. We may shift to virtual at some point, but part of our discussion today will actually sort of be what is our timeline for this project overall. The first thing I wanted to do was actually give you an overview of what this project is. If you look at the back of your agenda, I actually did print. The information on the back of the agenda, which Jordan is now putting on the screen for all of you all wonderful folks online, is directly taken from our scope of work with this project, which was written based on some recommendations that came out of the recent visioning plan that we adopted just recently and worked on through last year. The major project goals are to create a downtown revitalization plan that assesses both the current assets downtown, evaluates existing barriers to the economic goals of the community, presents recommendations to improve the downtown, and really builds on that original 1992 downtown plan that has been the base for all of the planning within Cascade Locks for obviously a couple of decades. This will probably include making design code amendments, looking at parking options, as well as recreational trail connections and signage improvements. It will also identify funding options for key projects that are identified through the community's work. We intend to develop draft language to update or replace a portion of the development code for Cascade Locks, focusing on the downtown commercial code and the sections of the code that's been put in. There's actually quite several different parts of the development code that link together to guide development within the downtown core. The intent is to make it friendlier in both a process and procedures point of view, but also in make it easier for developers, businesses, and residents to understand what the city wants, and then also easier for city staff to administer. We want to engage the community throughout that process, and we really want to see if we can engender significant resident involvement this summer and through the fall. So part of what I am going to be looking at the advisory committee to help me do is figure out how to get that involvement and really try to look at our public engagement plan and focus it and see how much we can get the community to really be involved in this process. We kicked off the plan just this month or last month, just with a little bit of research and literature review, which Gabby, my intern, has been working on. She is also, by the way, going to be taking notes today, so we will have really good notes from this meeting we can share with everybody as well. Then, starting today, we are going to kick off this planning process. An on-site assessment of downtown Cascade Locks during an outside peak recreation season will be part of that. I actually did come up a couple of weeks ago and did some work. And then we'll come back in a couple of weeks as well to do some more assessment during the tourist season. And have started a review of the development code and other city codes for barriers for downtown redevelopment. But as part of that, we will be looking at a subcommittee of this committee or of other community members to actually help me on that. Anybody who's really interested in working on the nitty-gritty of development code is invited to participate. I can see you're all just so excited to do that. So we'll be really looking at what the code needs to be updated. I don't know the last time an actual code audit was done here.
I don't know,
For
a couple decades, yeah.
yeah. But then we'll be looking as part of that, doing an inventory of current options for public parking. Looking at, we've already done an inventory of current parking, so we'll be researching some more additional options. And then researching options for bicycle and hiking trails as well downtown. And then funding options for anything that we do. All of those aspects will be part of the long range plan. Of course, we'll be working on the development code concurrently with that, starting in July. And then starting in July as well, we'll start the community engagement. So those things will all lace together to end with a final plan that hopefully will be complete by December and be able to be reviewed by City Council and adopted no later than March, with the goal of it being complete entirely by. It will be done by January at the latest for a couple of months of public review. Questions? What do you, about what we're getting ourselves into?
This is probably too much of a weeds, but there are two planning documents that I'm hoping made it easier literature review. One is the programmatic agreement for the historic Columbia River Highway as it pertains to downtown Cascade Locks, and if you don't have that, I'm happy to provide that. And then there was a Masters of Urban and Regional Program capstone project last year or 2 years ago.
2 years
That
ago.
looked at the park and rides. Okay, good.
Yeah, that one, I definitely.
Okay,
I do not have a copy of the program.
okay, I can love it too. Great. Just want to make sure that that's
Yeah.
included because those are pretty foundational.
Did not know that existed, so.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on my list to update all of those programmatic agreements, so Moser, River, and Cascade Locks each have one. And they all need to be amended, updated.
Can you tell me, or can you tell us a little bit about what's in it?
I don't have it memorized, I do know that it's overly prescriptive, and it talks about where the curb lines need to be. But 3 years ago, we repaved and we did curb bulb outs which are explicitly prohibited. But we did that with the full knowledge that ODOT was running the project, and I said, okay, we're gonna redo these programmatic agreements, so we're not in conflict. It hasn't happened yet, so it's definitely on my list.
Interesting. Okay, I didn't get those tweets and questions. Other things that you know, other than just the curb line that you wanted to change that I don't want to change?
There's a lot of very specific like signage things that either have been implemented or are no longer applicable, so those, yes, I don't have them memorized, but yes, I do have those things. Okay.
I foresee a longer interview with you later.
Sounds great. I look forward to it.
I'm gonna jump in here and I will note that we still have 4 open spots on this committee. Preferably, 3 of them would be primary stakeholders, either own a business or own property or live downtown, preferable, and then 1 more general community spot as well. So if you know anybody interested, send them my way.
You know anybody who wants to do code editing?
No.
I know.
I think I know someone. You might know this.
I did. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, sorry, I read the agenda and I thought it said Zoom.
No, there is a Zoom option on the bottom. So
Yes.
you just read it all the way through the end. That's great. But we're happy to have you here. So, Dave, we were just going over what was on the back of the agenda. Are there any other questions about sort of the general concept of the project? Anybody online?
Can we be explicit in sometimes showing or discussing the cross goals or task breakdown of other organizations such as Main Street or Tourism Committee or planning, like, do we talk about that? Or who might be involved in this or?
We will certainly be looking at who are the partners that will be implementing this document, and that will certainly be part of the discussion. I know Main Street only recently created itself, which is fabulous. I'm really delighted. Do you have yet even a tentative strategic plan for Main Street?
We have goals that we are honing in. And I would like to say, if this is the right time, our first full community meeting after affiliation, we had one prior, is Tuesday, June 25th at Gorgeous. If you felt it was appropriate to have your own table there, I can email folks and just invite you.
I got a question, is this, development code language, is this only for the downtown overlay, or is this for, the code in general?
That's a great question. And Jordan and I were talking about that just for this meeting. Part of what I would like this committee to help me do is define exactly what we mean by downtown. So the grant and the scope at this point don't have a map that specifies exactly where we want to actually work on. And part of the answer to your question is going to depend on where we scope the full boundaries of our downtown revitalization plan. Because as you probably know, there are a number of different zonings that are along Winapa, and depending on how far we go off of Main Street will depend on how many zonings get covered by this work. So we'll be looking at both the base zonings as well as the overlay zone. Because I don't think we can look at just the overlay zone, and make the changes that we probably need to do. So we'll be having to look at the base zones as well.
Yeah, if you look at this map, that kind of darker red is the downtown zone. In land use terms, but I think when most people think of downtown, they think of anything between the bridge. All the way out to City Hall here would be considered downtown, so all of Wanapa. And the downtown zone really stops at the school and doesn't include any of the port property. Or any of the railroads property that has been different ideas of a transportation hub. So are we talking about just the current downtown zone or that whole stretch from the bridge to Forest Lane? And then how wide is that? Are we talking a block up or are we talking 3 blocks up from Wanapa?
The Oregon Main Street director came and did a drive-through with me, and we affiliated on Wanapa all the way to Scenic Winds and the graveyard. That's where we ended, right?
Where in Chickens do you live?
Forest Lane, basically.
Oh,
Yeah, right here, where it splits.
so that's the Main Street boundary?
Because we feel that that Scenic Winds Motel is a potential, you know, something that might benefit the community as well as we have that little park at the cemetery, and we have a coffee cart right there.
Can I ask a dumb question? How long is Cascade Locks?
That's a fantastic question.
One into the other,
3 miles?
3 miles,
Mhm.
okay. All the way to the island?
What, the city limits are 3 miles.
All right, thanks.
Yeah,
I don't know how long the Main Street portion of it is, maybe like a mile. If we go all the way to the graveyard.
I have it in that report, I think, but
Do you have a copy of the comprehensive plans on map on there?
I have to dig it up. Trying to find it, the comprehensive.
Does anybody else have an opinion as to what you think, when we say downtown, what do you think? Where do you think the boundaries of downtown?
Yeah, I think that's fine, going from the bridge to the England, I think that's downtown.
Dave, what do you think about any side streets going up a little bit?
You know, that's difficult because, they're definitely connected to downtown, so people who live there are gonna have lots of people walking in front of their house, parking in front of their house, but, you kind of think of like streets in Portland, like Alberta, there's like, how far does Alberta go up the street? Really, it's mostly just the street, but then they're impacted in some way going all the way, 2-3 blocks sometimes into the neighborhoods.
I think of Cascade Inn is sort of on that side street. The hotel too, isn't it? But I guess you can have a parking lot there. But it's on Manapa as well, basically. Or the big White House across the street, if that ever got developed. Would that qualify for commercial? The Jerry's house, the White House by Gorgeous.
Oh, the one that had a head on the car?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what that is currently zoned for use.
That is, 1 second, please.
Is that one of our medium density residential?
I'm looking for Honeyonta, where are you? No, that is downtown, it is
Okay,
this
good.
lot right here.
Right.
Isn't it for sale too, for like a lot of money?
I think the folks at Gorgeous tried to buy it, but it wouldn't sell, but I don't know. Ton, your hotel is a Wanapa address, right? Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So for ease, we could just focus our work on anything that's zoned downtown.
Okay.
And then, but that does not pull in the port property, and nor does it pull in the citizens across the street from City Hall.
Oh, it doesn't.
Yeah, this open space right across the street here, yeah.
So, oh, so all of that on Napa, what does that light pink mean?
Commercial.
If you're cracking open your code, and there's a desire to include it, this might be the time, right?
Yeah, there, I mean, it's a slightly different process
Yeah.
to actually work with the property owner. We have to make sure, of course, that we weren't making anything more restrictive than their current uses, or they would have to sign off on that process. It's certainly something that we could offer them. I don't know that the city wants to actually force a zone change on them. The commercial code is much broader than the downtown code.
Okay.
And the downtown code has an overlay that very, very detailed, architectural standard that does not apply to the commercial areas.
But it sounds like you're, as part of this work, you're gonna.
That's really what we're looking at recommending, and the question is how much of, whether or not those properties that are vacant or the properties that are across from City Hall here, if we want to incorporate them into it, how far we want to go with that. It might be that we create the code and then offer those properties that, and that would be a low bar, if that wouldn't require them to do so. The city council could also move forward with changing the comp plan designation on those properties, which we also have to, so you'd have to start in to change the comp plan definitely, with or without their permission. And then the zoning would not necessarily match until they were willing to change zoning as well. The zoning being what would actually, they should be doing the development under the bell until they want to change it.
So I see a light pink and a dark pink. Are those different zoning codes?
Light industrial is the port property.
Oh,
Yeah, so, well, this is actually railroad property. Is light industrial. This is the commercial. And then this here is City Hall. And that is something different.
Open space.
Commercial residential,
Is it really?
Yeah.
We're commercial residential.
which is not commercial nor residential, it's an odd zoning that doesn't apply much.
so if you scrolled back toward Thunder Island Brewery, where does that commercial begin? What is our,
What do you mean?
I mean, what is, okay, right there, the light pink happens. What am I looking at? What, I mean, what,
That's a school, the big blue one is a school,
okay,
and then if you go up a little bit, it ends right there at
I see, I see.
the turn for the school.
Yeah, so the turn into the Marina Park is right around here,
So East Wind is at, where's East Wind driving?
right?
Thank you, okay.
Angie, you have your hand up?
I'm sorry, I took a bite of food. I'm selfishly eating dinner over here. I was just gonna ask you to share the zoning map because it sounded like you were looking at it. So you did it before I'm speaking now. So thank you for sharing. I think they're really good clarifications to work through as a group to make sure we're, on the same page about what's needed.
So the industrial portion, you said it's owned by the railroad?
Union Pacific Road. And Jeremiah probably knows more about this. There were plans to develop kind of this open space along the railroad into a transportation hub with a parking lot, a bus terminal, a pedestrian bridge to get over the tracks to the park, a bike hub. I don't know, whatever. I mean, there were concept drawings and everything. I don't know whatever happened to it. And Jeremiah, would you consider the Marine Park as downtown?
Would I would, yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's what I figured, what I wanted to ask.
And we never really got past conceptual drawings with the transportation hub stalled out with the railroad. I think there were some efforts made, but the port moved on to other projects.
And that was what, 5-6 years ago?
I would be guessing at a date. Dave, were you involved with that project at all?
Nope.
feel like that's been a thing since I've been working with Cascade locks,
Okay, so older.
maybe 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely was in works when I started 7 years ago.
Okay.
I think they got funding for the overpass originally from downtown, and then that didn't become plausible. And then they still had money in that grant left, so then they're like, well, let's draw up plans for over here, which was also financially not plausible, so.
Yeah, and I think that got shoehorned, so ODOT was running that grant, and it turned into the multimodal transportation plan for the, port area in the marina.
Okay.
It's been a pretty long time since I've heard about that plan, so
Yeah.
thanks for bringing me back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Switching out of here.
Jeremiah, can I ask if, does the marine park area have certain restrictions on usage because of original?
We're zoned public, and so really, I think my options are a school or some other community services. So yeah, most of everything that I want to do down there is either A, grandfathered in, or B, requires a conditional use permit.
But beyond zoning, was there some grant or some federal agency, state agency that says you must only do these things down here?
And just the public zone, just the zoning itself, right? I mean, when I read through the zone itself, yeah.
I believe the land actually was granted by the US Army Corps of Engineers
That's right.
100 years ago, and there were some restrictions when it was granted about what could be built above the water line, so there's. And then I think they also had to maintain the 3 houses there.
Has to maintain and remain open to the public.
Thank you. Jeremiah, could you actually get me, information on what the core restrictions are?
No problem.
And is that something that the court is looking at trying to change or would be interested in changing? Not the core restrictions, but the zoning?
Yes, potentially the zoning piece of it. I mean, there's certainly things down there that even right now that are grandfathered in, I suppose, but are outside the use, and that I don't have conditional uses permits for, like a marina. So yeah, we would be interested in updating what the port was able to do down there. The conditional use permit slows things down considerably. Thunder Island struggled with that for years with us.
So I'm hearing that it would basically be all of the pink area, the light industrial area, as well as the port. And then up to the intersection of Forest Drive.
Yes, yeah.
Excellent.
I think that probably the next question would be back into I guess the core of it.
Mhm.
How far up Wanapa? Do we go up to, Moody? Do we go a block up? Do we go all the way up to 84? How wide is this corridor?
To the Bridge of the Gods, right?
Well, I mean, that's from end to end, but, yeah.
Oh, I see. I don't know what's on there now. Is Moody on there?
Yeah, Moody's right here.
And what's the zoning currently?
It's a
That
residential zone.
is medium density residential.
Which allows no commercial at all, not even conditionally.
Do you have high density residential?
Yeah, we do.
But it's not near downtown.
It's in one spot over by government. It makes no sense.
I think Tony Lane too is that.
Does the commercial zoning allow for residential?
It allows mixed use and multifamily, yeah. But the medium density does not. The medium density may allow multifamily, I think it does.
I think with a conditional use permit, you're allowed to do more.
Oh, get that spot there. That must be.
Does the downtown zoning allow multifamily?
Yes,
That's,
mixed use, yes.
oh,
I heard, yeah.
It allows mixed use.
Commercial on bottom, residential on top. If there's a change, is what I understand.
Yeah, that's what mixed use is basically.
Angie, go ahead.
I'm scrolling through your code online right now, and I'm just curious, where is the resort commercial zone in proximity to the downtown commercial?
That is over where,
Port property.
the port property is, that's where the
Okay.
casino is being, supposed to be built.
It's beautiful, it would be beautiful resort
Yeah.
commercial.
So
Okay.
it's this light green color right here.
Okay, thank you. Just curious how far away it was.
Other end of town, yep.
That's a whole other can of worms right there.
It is
Yes.
kind of another can of worms.
That's Jeremiah's can of worms.
I've never seen the zoning map for that. It's fascinating. It's a beautiful can of worms you have, Jeremiah.
So when we first moved to town, that whole area over there was a proposal to move it to like the X zoning, which is a much more open, allowable zone where you could do commercial on the bottom, residential on top, and stuff like that. And then it stalled out, unfortunately. So unfortunately, right now, in that zone, there's high density, there's heavy industrial, light industrial, commercial resort. It's just like, there's all these little patches, and it makes it to where you want to do something, you can only do it in this one. And the piece of land's not that big, so it's, you're restricted to these kind of little pockets, which is unfortunate.
So part of my agenda today is to talk with you about some ideas that I've been having, and I've been working with Gavin on, for how we could change the code for Cascade locks to try to address some of the goals for the community. Would you be interested in seeing that now? And then we can come back and wrap back around to what those goals would be? Because the next part of the agenda actually just talks about like current conditions and then prioritizing issues, which would just be a beginning conversation with you all, but then that will be further fleshed out more with through public engagement over the summer. But we could talk for a minute about form-based code. I could give you an idea of kind of what I've been looking at, and then we could wrap back around to the conversation regarding how we're gonna really have this conversation with the community, as well as necessarily maybe how far we want to take this code modification. Interested? Sure?
Yes.
Okay. Would you share the application?
Yes.
See what you got. So it's the presentation tab.
That one?
That one.
Yeah.
For you all to notice, this is actually a PDF, so we're just gonna, Jordan's just gonna scroll
Yeah.
through it for me. Okay, now, it's just, yeah. This presentation was developed as part of our original research. We were looking at background and kind of what the code currently looks like and what our options might be for moving forward. So it goes through some of the goals of this project. I included a little bit of information and questions about general definitions that I'm going to touch on the further on in the project as well. What issues we have with the current code and what form-based code is and how that kind of relates to Cascade locks, as well as what benefits or drawbacks you might have from that type of code. And then looks at similar locations that I think get to what the original intent of the downtown plan was in a different way than we currently have. And then look at questions and sort of closing remarks, which is really more where do we go from here? So really, this is just looking at general issues of the code. I wasn't trying to get very far into the code at this point. And then this document also has some links for literature review, if you're interested in reading more about these things. But at the end, there are a bunch of links for additional information. I just wanted to make sure that we're all talking about the same type of things. So I did have a little bit of just a few definitions here. Everybody knows what the comp plan is, which is the document that Cascade Locks has adopted in order to comply with the statewide planning goals. There are 18 planning goals that are required from the Department of Land Conservation and Development, that every jurisdiction have a comprehensive plan addressing. Housing is one of those, as is economic development, urban. I never remember what the urban one is, sorry, and, of course, utilities, transportation, et cetera, are all part of the statewide planning goals. So the comprehensive plan of Cascade Locks was originally adopted in the early 80s. It has been amended a couple of times, although not completely. The last modification that is applicable to this project was the adoption in 1992 of the downtown plan as part of the comprehensive plan. The development code is intended to implement that comprehensive plan, and as such, it actually directly references the 1992 downtown plan and includes the goals and policies of the downtown plan directly into the development code at present. They quoted it directly, actually. It also includes the administrative procedures for the city of Cascade Locks on how they implement the comprehensive plan requirements. In this case, how it covers everything from how you build a new building, as well as enforcement for parking, signage, and all of the aspects of development within a community. The two other pieces here are really just things that you need to consider when we do get into actually looking at the code. The first thing I always look at is whether or not it's discretionary or not. And if you built a building in town or anywhere else, you know that if you look at a code and you don't know necessarily how to enforce it, and if it's up for question and up for interpretation, that means it's discretionary. Most of Cascade Locks' code regarding downtown is very discretionary. The actual definition for discretionary is able to be decided by a particular person or group rather than being controlled by the rules. So in this case, anytime you have to go to a conditional use permit, it's basically all of the standards in it are discretionary there. And it's up to the interpretation of the public body as to how, whether or not it actually matches the rules. Clear and objective, on the other hand, is actually a requirement that comes out of ORS 197.307, which is the needed housing statute, which basically says it has to be, every standard has to be clear and objective. You can't have anything that requires any degree of discretion that is applicable to what's called needed housing. And a couple of years ago, the LUBA helped us define needed housing as all housing. So if you have housing in any of these zoning areas, your standards have to be clear and objective, and there can be no discretion applied to them. So if you have a standard, it has to say you have X amount of windows, 10 windows. It can't say you have to have windows that match the neighbors. It has to be much more clear and objective. The intent being that makes development actually faster and easier because everybody knows, both the city council and the planning commission, as well as a developer, they all know what to expect and there's no questions in the process. And then also, if you have all of the standards clear and objective, you technically don't even ever need to go to a planning commission because the staff would just review, did you meet all the clear and objective standards, and if you did, then it's approved. If you have any discretion, then it needs to go to a public body, either a notice of adjacent properties or all the way to a formal public hearing to apply that discretion. So the intent behind clear and objective from the legislative point of view was to try to make housing easier and more affordable to develop in Oregon because we have such a housing crisis. It has, however, it does bleed into commercial at this point because anytime you have mixed use residential with that, then your standards have to be clear and objective. They cannot be discretionary. So this is, if you flip to the next slide, and I'm gonna keep going, one more. One of the problems with the current code. So this is just the definition of the purpose of the current Cascade Locks comprehensive plan and the zoning code itself, which is basically to enforce the planning and development regulations for the comprehensive plan. Next slide. The current code has a lot of ambiguous language and conflicting regulations within it. I want, as part of this process, to talk to the two property owners, the Thunder Island Brewery and the Gorge Brewery, that and how their process of going through building a new building in Cascade Locks has been, because they're the only structures that have actually had to use this code. Even though it's been in the books for over 20 years, we've only had 2 properties that actually had to use it. So it tells me that there's there's some problems with the code as well as potentially just issues with attracting people who want to go through that hurdle. But when I was reading it, I couldn't actually figure out how I would actually enforce it. So I think there are a lot of things that we can do to make it more clear. The next one. And it's very inflexible at points. So it's both very difficult to interpret, and then also it's very rigid, which is interesting because typically when something's really intended to be very detailed and give that much discretion, it's also supposed to be more lenient. So it's an interesting challenge right now. The next. And if you have read the downtown code currently, it requires all new development in the downtown area to meet one of 3 styles, which is classical revival, early 20th century craftsman, or arts and crafts, or Cascadia. So actually 4. I don't actually know what Cascadia is, which is why there's a question mark. There's no such architectural style. So, which is just, right now the code says you have to be one of these 3 styles. And then Cascadia is a 4th that I don't know what that means.
I think that was more based on, I would say, the color of the building, so you can't build a bright pink building in downtown, it has to match the mountainside and.
That is not how the code is written. I mean, that may be true, paint is one of the things that is regulated, but it is not listed as a Cascadia.
Well, I mean, I find it weird that Thunder Island and Gorgeous Brewing, the 2 buildings built in the last 10 years, fall under the same design standards and look completely different. It's just odd to me. I mean, if we're gonna have a theme, let's make it a theme, or just not do it.
Or not have a thing.
Yeah.
My experience with Cascadian is usually like a mountain vibe, right? Like it's something that you'd see in some kind of destination resort if you were to go to something like that. Yeah, I've come across it before, but I agree, it's not really defined anywhere. Well, but it appears to be an architectural theme used in other places and other codes. But I agree, it'd be good to clarify.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of interesting to me that honestly, arts and crafts, craftsmen and classical revival, as these pictures showed, are residential styles. They're not commercial styles. And specifically, the code says that they wanted to apply the styles of these 4 different architectural styles from the 20s and 30s. And the 20s and 30s commercial structures looked entirely different. They didn't look like this at all. They were typically straight brick storefronts with windows on the first floor, and they were brick 2-story straight half built buildings. I know Cottage Groves, where I live, their entire downtown was built in the 20s, and it doesn't look like this at all. So there's a little bit of a question mark immediately within the code as soon as you read it. I don't know what that is, and I don't know how to interpret it. So in the next page, next slide. So yeah, you have these 2 buildings. I'm not certain if either of them would be Cascadia, craftsman.
I think Gorgeous kind of looks craftsman.
There are elements certainly within Gorgeous that are craftsman, particularly with the pedestrian awning on the first floor. But I think both of them are attractive buildings. I'm not certain how the code got to them.
Yeah,
So. Matter of fact, I wonder about Thunder Island because a lot of Thunder Islands looks like it directly contradicts the code requirements. So, and yet I think it's a great building. So we have these question marks. The code also currently prohibits anything higher than 35 feet, which is really challenging if you actually want to encourage mixed use development. Because a 35 feet high building is, as it's shown here, basically 2 stories maximum, 2 stories with a little bit of extra, but you can't get even a 3rd story in under 35 feet.
I think it's 35 feet on the
north side.
riverside, and it's 60 on the other side.
I did not find that in the code, but okay, good, that's better. And that is to get the slope up.
I think that's to maintain the views for the
Yeah.
ups freeway side.
That makes sense as to why Gorges is so much higher.
Yeah.
They could get there. And so I'm not saying that any of the pieces that the code currently requires need to be tossed out, because obviously you could get some pretty buildings out of it. The question is it clear for those who are trying to use it, and how do we make it as easy as possible? The next slide. Just talks about some other challenges with the code. So I would personally say from the outside, that if we've only had 2 developments in almost 20 years, that the current code is not encouraging development as a whole. It did successfully come up with 2 buildings that are lovely. So what do we use from it that would move us forward and make it Cascade Locks a more attractive place to develop in? And particularly to redo existing buildings if we're looking largely at redevelopment and how we encourage people to redesign their buildings as they move forward. If we do have residential uses downtown, though, it has to be clear and objective. And so that is part of the question as far as when we define downtown, if we have any residential areas in it, we have to figure out a clear and objective path, which means you can have 2 different ways. They can have a clear and objective standard, and then if people don't like how rigid that is, they can apply to the city council or the planning commission for waivers of some of those policies and allow a more discretionary path. The current code, though, is entirely discretionary. Okay. So the question is then, what could we do? Among other policies that we might apply, this project is focusing really on the code. So within the code, what can we do? I didn't. Next. The current code regulates both property use and development and defines the interactions of buildings and the space. And it's intended to express community values. Next slide, please. One of the things that we could consider is what's called form-based code. So I think that the illustrations on the side show a city in Oregon that chose to implement form-based code for a pedestrian or a transit corridor that was principally developed in the 50s, I think, in this particular instance. They adopted a new code that was really trying to work more with the public spaces and the buildings themselves and how the public interacts with those spaces rather than focusing so much on the actual buildings. Next slide, or just hold on, you can see with the implement of that code, this is what it currently looks like. Oh, nice. So form-based code, it really does work much more within the public realm.
So it's Portland.
It's a part of Portland, yeah, they did this. But that's not to say that we are ever going to get to this lower picture, because obviously it has an island in the middle. And we have a freeway, or a main road down the center that we may never get to the point of having that kind of infrastructure. But the intent of these pictures is really to show the difference between conventional zoning and form-based code zoning.
How have you seen form-based code work in rural communities?
I actually did not, other than these photos, my references here don't go to Portland. I just haven't been looking at them. If you want to scroll down, Jordan, to a couple, this is kind of the idea between form-based code. It's focusing more on street and building types than it is on the actual the total maximum density use setback parking requirements, those types of things, which is what conventional zoning calls. The examples further in. Keep going. We'll just scroll down to the examples.
This one or?
Keep going. Keep going. I'm skipping because I want to go down to some of the examples that we included. Sisters has a form-based code that they use. They also have a very strong vision for what their community looks like and have a really strong architectural code that's attached to their form-based code, but it actually has really worked for them. But that is actually a form-based code, not a conventional zoning code. The next one, I find it funny that you can get to that level of detail in architecture with form-based code. So this is just really to show that you don't have to necessarily let go of a theme if the community wants to maintain that theme. But Ashland is the actual next example. also a form-based code at this point. So you can work within a form-based code and get to the point of having a clear objective path that gives people that can a lot more flexibility on their properties, but still maintain an architectural theme if that is the community's desire. So that's really sort of where I was looking at going. It's designed to be much more user-friendly is really the goal.
So if I'm understanding it correctly, maybe I'm way off, form-based is more what it ends up looking like compared to what's actually used as?
Right.
Okay.
Right, so the intent of this is really to eliminate that long list in all of the zoning districts of what's permitted and what's conditionally permitted. It focuses much less on the use that's inside the building and more on how the public interacts with the building and what the building is doing. So
The aesthetic side.
the aesthetic side of it rather than the interior.
How does that create or limit barriers to development? Because I mean, I think it
Yeah.
creates barriers to development as well.
The current code already has the barriers architecturally, so if we just look at whether or not it will create additional barriers, the intent would not be to create more challenge on the exterior than the current code already has, and actually hopefully maybe refine the standards that the current code has for architectural so that they're a little clearer and they don't contradict themselves, because there are a number of places that I found contradictions in the architectural standards. But if we can make the architectural standards sort of make sense, what it doesn't do is then tell you whether or not you can have only these types of residential or these types of commercial or these types of industrial or these types of uses within it. So it allows a lot more flexibility for the use of the building rather than focusing so much on what's, the current code is focused really on use.
And again, I might be way off, but the example that comes to my mind is my wife loves to do woodworking. If she ever wanted to open a storefront, she could actually have the back half of the building her workshop, which I think is considered light industrial, which, yeah, wouldn't be allowed in the storefront in the front. Something to that is kind of what I'm thinking. Okay.
Would it allow ground floor residential
It could,
as long as it looked like it wasn't residential?
well, as long as it looked like whatever the standard the community wanted it to look like, which, that's a good question.
Kind of what the village in Fairview was like, right?
I've never been. to
Okay,
Fairview,
all
sorry.
right, they have their fancy downtown, and I buying a house, and they had houses listed in their village area, and it did not look like a house. It was in the middle of their downtown area.
Mhm.
How would that apply to like existing buildings? I mean, if you have an existing building, then they can put whatever they want in there, or they have to, you know, fix the storefront or fix the way they interact on the street before they.
That actually is something that you would write into the code. It's one of the questions that I would ask as well. Typically, when you have a lot of grandfathered in buildings, basically, they can continue on and as non-conforming uses for as long as they don't change. When in your non-conforming use statute, you normally have a tipping point, that's what I like to think about it, at what point do they tip over and then they have to come into compliance with current code? Is it a change of use that requires them to get, to come into compliance with the current code? Is it 50% remodel value or 100% remodel value? It can be all sorts of different, I've seen a number of different options chosen. The community's just gotta decide, we can look at different ranges of options and decide what would be the tipping point.
But like the gas stations downtown, if they did a full remodel, they wouldn't be allowed to do a full remodel, or they could do a full remodel as long as it still is a gas station.
Right, well, that's the thing, we'd have to decide. We could write it into the code one way or another. You can get really pretty flexible with this if you just gotta decide what you want to do. And the hard part is figuring out exactly what those points are and what the community wants to see. I would recommend anytime you have a lot of non-conforming use, that you have a point at which you are trying to bring them into conformity. And it might be that you might say that any change you make has to be in compliance. So if the gas station were converting just the store portion, like the convenience store portion, then any changes they made there would have to come more into compliance, but that could be done, the question that could be a discretionary application that says, well, these are the things that I'm doing to bring it more into compliance, but it's clearly not going to come fully into compliance unless we're changing use. something like that. You can do all sorts of different formats on that. I don't know yet, what do people want?
We took a lot of data in the strategic planning and the last 3 years of city picnic data. An overwhelming, at least. I thought I read in the strategic plan and in the city's picnic data, overwhelming number of citizens wanted more services downtown and a more walkable downtown with more vibrancy. And many specifically said to clean up derelict buildings, to, yeah, so. At least, and I imagine you're gonna do more community outreach as well, but, yeah, I envision, and I know the state and the federal government are looking at more second-story housing or more workforce housing, not just affordable housing, which this town is lacking both. And then, of course, parking, which you know the designs, because you do this work, obviously parking, which is not affronting our Main Street, reducing the walkability and the placemaking, so behind or underneath or how it's done. But obviously parking, anytime you add more things, you gotta add more parking.
Current parking standard, I think, actually requires a parking lot, a parking space for every 500 feet of floor area.
Sounds good. One thing also depends on the type of business too.
Yeah, the downtown code itself says 500 feet, it doesn't actually tell you what, if it's a by-right business, it's not by use, it's just period.
Okay.
I would recommend that it should probably be by type, but if you're gonna remove types, then it might not. So what do you all think? How far do we want to take this code into a new, into a different realm? Do we want to look at just small changes to make it easier? Or do we want to look at really changing the kind of, the backbone of the code as far as it goes?
You're talking the downtown code or you're talking?
And I think if we go, larger, we have to, it'll be more than just the downtown section.
Yeah.
It'll end up having to be the site design, condition section and probably the non-conforming use section and probably a couple of other sections. I wouldn't be surprised if it touches a number of different things.
Yeah, I think the downtown code, definitely needs to change it with being. For us building our building, massive amount of headaches and cost overruns just because we're trying to fit what was, in a really old document and, yeah, there's not that many people who have developed downtown, you're right, it's just been, a few of us over the years, it's always been a challenge for everybody where it's, if anybody's building anything Cascade lots, like on the downtown, that's trying to take away the hurdles. But yeah, for me, like the big thing is also just the derelict buildings, like how do we get rid of the buildings that just sit there? It's like, there's a number of those, I don't know if there's many cities that have great ways or methods to make it to where it's, hey, you can't have something that just sits there empty. I mean, this, I don't know if this is a code thing or if it's a city thing, I always thought there should be a minimum power usage for every building in downtown, so it's like. You have to spend $10,000 on power a year, which if you're running a business, you easily go over that. If you're under that, then you gotta pay the annual power bill for underground power lines down there.
Well, if you have an active power account, there typically is a monthly bill, even if you're not using it, but I don't know if they have active power accounts.
Yeah, but buildings aren't used, so they're empty, so they don't have big bills. But, I mean, I think another thing is the gas stations in downtown really break up our downtown, so I don't know if there's any way that we could. I mean, at this point, you can't really say. Hey, you can't be here anymore, but, I don't know, what other cities do to get rid of gas stations out of their, walking corridor? I mean, can we have a gas tax on the downtown zone? A transportation sidewalk tax for every transaction? I don't know.
That would only be applicable to the two downtown. I just look into that. I don't know if you can adopt it by zone or if it's by city limits. But I think that the current code actually already prohibits new drive-throughs.
Yes. Correct.
So you're limited right now to the existing drive-throughs. And if they stopped using them for 6 months, then they would be non-conforming and couldn't reuse them. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's 1 year.
Oh, the non-conforming year is 1 year?
Yeah.
That could be changed. Most jurisdictions is only 6 months. So if that's something that wanted to happen, that could be actually, we can narrow that limit. You could also adopt a derelict building code. That would require at least a certain level of maintenance. And then have penalties for failure to maintain to that level.
I like that. I've heard it called the dark store code. And people would rather than sell or lease than pay for it. Because we have a lot of buildings that would be in non-compliance with the dark store code. We can do that in this group. And I like what Dave said about walkability. So if that's form-based, then I like that. And I would hate to lose a gas station in town. I do think it draws some folks in, and I think it could, and I don't know how expensive it is to move it, or if we help find grants, because I'm presuming that's underground tanks and things, but certainly also encouraging, like Oswego has that cute little old-fashioned gas station, a design code. And maybe a mechanic would be useful. I mean, make it more something that is a service to the community. But again, whether, I don't want to talk about just two specific businesses, but this walkability and placemaking, I hear a lot about placemaking across Oregon. Main streets, how do we get folks, when they come to spend more downtime downtown, and go all the way from Shauna's to Bridgeside to the, and tell their friends, come back, there is a lot to do here. You don't have to just put Cascade locks on your blip for one thing. Going to TIV, but then, they can go shopping, we're getting a new art collective.
Yes, fabulous.
So that's exciting.
So one of the things that we're gonna do this summer is have a design event. I have a landscape architect from the university is going to participate in this project and come up. And one of the things that we can do is focus on what would that walkability standard look like. Maybe even look at a gas station and figure out how keep the use, but figure out how to make it more integrated into the downtown and make it less just a disruption of the walkability of downtown.
There's a grant program, that, it's actually closed, but they haven't been getting much more applications, so they're gonna reopen in the near future. And they're targeting rural, cities, and in Region 1, ODOT's Region 1, Cascade Locks is one of them. And it's called the Carbon Reduction Program. And they're looking for infrastructure to decarbonize the transportation system. So I could, looking forward in the future, e-bikes, EV vehicles, could you combine some sort of EV infrastructure with a traditional gas station, so you're serving both of those? And then the gas station is so centrally located, as folks are charging or whatever, they could walk around and drop some money in the city. So just wanted to put that plug out there. I can connect you with the person who's running the grant application process. But yeah, I think thinking innovative, I like the old timey at the gas station idea. But then also big forward thinking as we transition into more electric.
There's good plan. Which gas station you're talking about, both of them, the silver one and the other one? Is that
Shell, and then there's the commercial one right next to Shell, I think.
I mean, there's two, but that's not.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that kind of that lot, the old Chinese restaurant breaks things up more than the gas stations. Having something there would probably fill that gap.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking more of like when I walk down on the street with the stroller. There's cars coming in and out,
Oh,
in and
yeah.
out, and it's one continuous curb cut. It's not, there's not defined curb cuts, there's no.
Street trees, they solve everything.
Are we allowed to like put street trees or benches on the sidewalk? Do we own that?
It's their street, not ours.
We only own the curb though, so this is where it gets really complicated, and generally speaking, trees are a maintenance complication. In the place that I could say that, and I love me a tree, but, you know, the root that you get in the sandbox, if you're really careful and tight, it can block, view sheds for people crossing. You just installed all these lovely crosswalks, you don't wanna block the view of the folks trying to cross the street. There is a very motivated gentleman, who's reached out to me a couple of times looking to figure out how to make it happen, and it's hard to do. And it's hard to do in a way that makes it helpful. That is to say, past the property line, behind the sidewalk, you could add all the trees your heart desires.
But the sidewalk is on that property, is it?
I don't think it is, I think it's
So you think it's
city.
just the curb?
Yeah, I think we're curb to curb. It's different in every community. I think we're highway over city street, which means we only own curb to curb.
And then the city owns the sidewalks?
I think you guys own all the way to our property line, because when we wanted to build our building. I had to talk to ODOT about the size of the sidewalk.
Okay. That might have been your access permit though.
The side, it was a sidewalk in front of our building, and then they were gonna put a new crosswalk in, that was 10 feet. And then they made it 8 feet. In front of our building.
Sounds like Angie.
Yeah.
I know
Thank you.
that the federal government has allocated a great deal of funds for urban trees because of climate change and reducing the solar heat that is radiated from the streets and sidewalks. So I know there's grants for that, but you're saying it would be on private property, not on the.
ODOT would greatly prefer that trees be on private property and not. In either whatever the city's right of way or our right of way.
Right. There are other types of vegetational planters so that you could install that aren't trees, even on private property that might have some certainly the cooling aspects. And storm drainage filtration as well, but what is the storm drainage system on?
If we just own curb to curb, I think it's the city's responsibility, because generally how that works, but Angie probably knows more about this. I feel like I'm not over my skis.
Hi, Angie.
You're not over your skis. I appreciate that. I have two thoughts to contribute to this. Again, I have the luxury of a second screen over here, so I'm sleuthing around Google Maps looking at this location, and I'm wondering, there looks like there's green space between Overlook Park and the Eastwind Drive-In, and I'm wondering if there's room in this conversation to embrace that as a possible asset for a trail or pedestrian pathway connection with a view that sort of brings folks on a scenic route through downtown, right? And connects pieces where you'd want pedestrians or funnels pedestrians out of those curb cuts and high traffic areas, but also keeps it tucked in. So I have that question, and I can share my screen if you'd like me to, because it's pretty easy to see. But also I wonder if, given that there's a handful of gas stations in the same place, and there's so many interesting things you can do in a gas, like particularly an old gas station that's been reclaimed, right? That had the tanks removed and all of that. And I'm not hearing that being suggested here, but those structures often lend themselves well to like food cart pods and, you know, covered seating areas and little like outdoor market type venues that I wonder if the current gas station owners or managers have had thoughts about what they'd like to do if the code allowed it, right? And I would just encourage it, if we're going to be focusing on specific business types in this conversation, that we engage with those business owners early on so that they're not surprised by the public process or any recommendations that come out, because they may very well have some brilliant ideas to suggest for this, but also they may be willing to actually do them at the end of it if it's something that they're supportive of. So I'll stop there, but I just know that we can't, you know, we can plan for something beautiful, but we can't force landowners to actually do these things at the end of the day unless they want to, right? Because their existing use is hypothetically permitted and in place. And so if we could make sure that we're asking them what they want to do, like, I think there's a higher probability of them actually doing it in a couple of years, or, you know, whatever the build out might be, than if we just share with them.
Right.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'll stop rambling, but thank you
Yeah.
for sharing the screen. I'd love to know more about that green space. I don't know if it's blackberries and super steep or flat and yeah, yep.
Yeah, it's mostly blackberries and it's actually a pretty steep hill down to the tracks.
Do you think that the landowners would be willing to share some of the less steep areas and sort of accommodate more foot traffic? Because if they had, you know, if there was a benefit to them to bring pedestrians back by their storefronts for one reason or another, they may be willing to, oh, thank you. How much?
I don't know, walk behind Thunder Island or?
Yeah, there's some vegetation back there. I mean, we certainly would be all for it, but, I don't know how far you could get along that strip, because, by the time you get to the fish market, then there's a ravine on the other side.
Yeah,
And,
it's-
if you go the other way behind the Buddy's Arcade, right past the post office, it goes steep down,
Oh, yeah.
and then it, I don't know, I've never been back in there. Maybe there's a.
I guess we could level it and make a path if we wanted to, just take a few dollars. You know,
A $1,000, and then behind the Chinese, I know you can walk behind the Chinese, not sure about the gas stations, I've never walked behind them.
You can plant trees back there. Right, Tara?
I did reach out to at least the employees that happen to be working at the gas stations at the time, and I gave them the information about this meeting, but I never heard back from them, so.
But yeah, Angie, absolutely. If we wanted to do anything that targeted any property or part of the engagement, we will absolutely include the property owners in that conversation beforehand.
I did reach out to Mark at Chevron owner, but he doesn't live in town.
I guess I have one question about this whole plan. I mean, the streets, we got these new crosswalks. And then we had all these beautifully painted crosswalks everywhere. And I was super excited. And then a couple weeks later, they went and they ground them all out. And now, every time I cross on one of those, I'm like, man, I used to be a priority, but then somebody said I'm not anymore and took them out.
Speak to that. So the contractor had a contract for a certain number of crosswalks. And they kind of went rogue and added crosswalks where they were not approved. So adding a crosswalk is not as simple as putting the paint down. There's a whole analysis that needs to go through, because we get sued when someone is in a place that we say is safe for pedestrians and they get hit by a car. So we are very careful on where we strike crosswalks. We do some data crunching, we look at the numbers, and so unfortunately, the contractor kind of went outside the scope of the work that they were required to do, and they were required to then take it out. Every intersection has a crosswalk legally. Not a lot of drivers understand that, but we didn't want to have a straight crosswalk that signals to you that you're a priority here if we didn't have the confidence that drivers would also agree. And that we weren't putting, we do that in a very deliberate, careful way.
So, but isn't there a reverse to that where someone gets hit, where there used to be a painted sidewalk, crosswalk, and then you're like, oh, well. Now it's your own fault, because I don't know.
I think what Tara's pointing to is that the lines of fiction.
Yeah,
And
it's
driver behavior, is
yeah.
driver behavior, they make you feel comfortable as a pedestrian, but they don't change driver behavior. Like, so they might actually create a risk.
Like, is it ODOT that would be the one that would install, like, press a button and flashes to cross? And what would
That
you,
would be more
that is-
effective.
even more complicated a process than striping. And we have been adding those in, and those are stupid expensive.
Yeah.
If that's a desire, that's something that we can request. It has to go up to our region engineer to get signed off on.
I've had a couple of people with strollers say they've also been hit, almost been hit because
Yeah.
we are the old highway
Yeah.
and there are people just coming in for gas.
Yep.
They are.
And there's a sidewalk and, or there is, sorry, there is a speed limit that I have found personally isn't necessarily enforced. And so, adding, I think having an engaging downtown actually slows people naturally. So I think a lot of this work is all related in that you make a more compelling, vibrant downtown when there are more people. As more people come, then we start meeting our metrics for adding sidewalk or for adding crosswalks, adding the flashing beacons. And people naturally slow down, so it's a triple win there. But it's again, the chicken, the egg, you kind of like, what comes first? And it sounds like this process is a good place to start because we're here now, we're
Yeah.
talking.
Then talk about what transportation standards we wanna work with ODOT to develop, and the next stage may be a formal plan with ODOT to actually figure out how those would play in.
And I've been beating this drum, but the city's transportation system plan is how many thousands of years old?
23. So.
23 years old.
If
So
all-
2001?
Yeah, if all goes well, as soon as this whole process wraps up, I will have already applied for a TGM grant and been
Yes.
awarded, and then the start of the creating a TSP will start as soon as this one's over. So
And-
I'll write in from downtown plan into transportation.
Yeah.
So a goal of this project then needs to be the recommendations for the TGM. At least some goals for some ideas.
Some
for the
idea,
TGM.
yeah, would be helpful.
Yeah,
Cause if we develop our downtown, it's more walkable, it has to be safe.
Yeah.
And currently crossing Wanapa is not
Yeah.
necessarily safe.
And our number one goal is safety, so we are happy to work with you to help with that.
We probably need to talk about who actually owns the sidewalks.
Yes, we need to definitely.
Because I've been told by my staff that it's your guys' sidewalk and it's your guys' storm drains.
We're that meme with Spider-Man, like
Yeah.
all the Spider-Men pointing at each other, I think that's what's happening here. Yes, and I can dig in a little bit more, I have heard from our maintenance folks pretty clearly that it's not ours, but, Dave's experience in talking with ODOT on the sidewalk outside the building, has a different interpretation, so I can figure that out.
What about like a protected bike lane? Is that something that ODOT does on the roads? If we were to, because right away, 2 bike lanes,
Yeah.
could we, I mean, is this something we can attach to this plan, or that's
That's
because?
more of a
Yeah.
transportation.
it's more of a TSB study part, but it's something that we could sketch in and then could be really
Yeah.
detailed out in a TSB.
Yeah.
And ODOT, we're trying to be a nicer, more gentle, ODOT, and we have this lovely document called the Blueprint for Urban Design, and it really helps us, the community, tell us what you want to see along your roadway that is owned by us, and that informs, if we agree, so it's a conversation, and that informs what kind of facilities we start to look like, wide sidewalks, protected bike lanes, et cetera. I will, put a small caveat out there, if you want physically hard barrier protected bike lanes, we then say it's on the city or the local jurisdiction to maintain and operate, because we just don't have the types of equipment to be able to sweep, say like a elevated barrier protected bike lane. We don't have the equipment to maintain that, and as part of the agreement that we would, require to install such a facility, we would need to work through the maintenance piece. But our maintenance folks just don't have the ability to work with.
There's some ice sweepers now you can attach onto the back of the bike.
Right,
So I volunteer
Yeah.
to sweep.
With your fleet?
Same with the like crosswalks, is that something that you could sketch into like the traffic calming and crosswalks, is that something like?
It's based on counts, and so I'm not certain that we could actually, we could point out places that the community felt that there needed to be a crossing or needed to be an improved crossing as part of this. And it really then also look at what they would say regarding what private property owners need to do as far as addressing this, but then it would be for a longer conversation with ODOT and really based on traffic counts, which would have to be part of the TSP. And I don't have funding in this project for traffic counts. I'm pursuing.
And we took some, not last June, but the June before, the request of the board to really look at how much traffic was backing up right at Wanapah and the bridge. So we have pretty recent data at the peak of the peak. I think it was maybe July that we took it.
Did you do pedestrian crossings as well?
Yeah, we take full, so bikes, peds, vehicles and type of vehicles. So we have, passenger vehicles as well as the larger trucks. And fun fact, there's a length limit on Wanapah Street that is not signed and not publicly acknowledged, but 50 feet is your length limit on Wanapah Street.
50 feet of a vehicle.
A vehicle.
So technically, any semi is not allowed on Wanapah.
Correct.
Awesome.
But it's not signed, so it's not.
Which is
enforceable.
impossible, because you are forcing people to go down Wanapah,
Uh,
because that's the only way to get back on the highway westbound.
So how did that link limit get in and when was it put in?
Nobody has been able to tell me that answer. I have asked that question multiple times. I've also asked how to remove that because we heard very strongly from both the port and the city. Your predecessor also felt very strongly about that. I think it's one of two things, or might be both. One is all of the historic highway has a length limit of 50 feet throughout the drivable sections. And except for where I've managed to reduce that down in the waterfall corridor in Multnomah County. Or two, we were trying to discourage trucks from getting off at exit 44 to bypass the way station in the middle. And so
it was put in.
People know people, and they're maybe trying to skirt the system so they don't have to go through the way station and pay. I think they have to pay no matter what now, so maybe like the technology has changed, but it could be either of those, it could be both of those. Nobody has been able to give me a clear picture or understanding.
Is that part of the agreement, like?
No, it's not part of the program agreement.
Okay, so that's just another.
That's something we found out, so we were working with the port to kind of redesign that intersection at Wanapah Bridge, Toll Bridge Road. Because we were hearing that trucks were off tracking going into the oncoming traffic to make the turn. They were taking out the signage, they were taking out the curbs there, but as soon as you start to pull the thread, it raises more questions.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Is ODOT have any plans to put a westbound lane out by the industrial park to reduce traffic? Those 50-foot trucks that come down Forest Lane through.
So Forest Lane is at ODOT. So
I know, but then it gets on to,
Yeah, a westbound on ramp over there.
is there no,
we have no plans for any upgrades in our funding future, which goes out currently till 2027. So we have no plans for any construction upgrades through 2027.
and I read something got passed recently about cameras, speed cameras, is that an ODOT thing? Or is that, who helps the city get those?
I have lost the question with that.
Okay, so it's not, ODOT doesn't usually do the speed cameras?
I can look that up for you.
Thank you, because League Board and Cities said it was a big win for small towns.
Okay.
So I want to recognize that we are at our limits. No, you're fine. The only thing I really There are two things that I would love to chat about real fast before we leave. Because I've got a sense now of the kinds of issues that we might want to come forward with. And I will put this together and then come back to you with a more concrete plan for how we're going to look at the code and what we're going to do with it. The first is that, are you all interested in actually being part of a subcommittee on looking at the code, or would you prefer not to be and just be at a more advisory level? The way we wrote the scope originally was that we were gonna have a smaller group of people who might be interested in actually looking at the code rather than forcing everybody to look at it. But I don't know how everybody feels. I wanna invite you to participate if you want to. But if you also don't want to, I understand that too.
Do you want it hands raised?
Think about
now?
it, and we will get back to you. The other question was, are there any events this summer that we want to coordinate work with, or should I just work with Jordan to figure out when we might be able to do a community charrette that we can invite people in with our landscape architecture to address some of these public realm questions? Is it
How soon, how early in the month do you wish to do that?
July, August? The earliest would be July 7th. So after that.
And
We do live music at the brewery every Wednesday. There's quite a lot of locals that all live in town and have families. So you wanna meet locals where they're already gonna be and not have an event that you just hope people show up to.
That'd be perfect.
There's a lot of people gonna be there.
And later, we have done a community picnic and I am understanding it might be coalesced with the firemen thing. We don't know, but that's usually September, isn't it?
End of August.
End of August. So for a later one, if you want to do it, we get a pretty good turnout, but I like the TIB idea.
I do too. Okay, excellent. Then I will get in touch with my landscape architect and we will come back to you with a couple dates when we might want to come and join.
Yep, it's every Wednesday.
Okay.
So, and I can, just as long as it's not around PCTAs or half marathon. That's in August, pretty much most of August, it's, there's some pretty big events.
So well, then the July downwind, but it's just
So it's great.
had to be that.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, it sounds like end of July.
okay. I'm also going to be asking all of you, if you don't mind, if I give you a call and do a brief interview with you about your specific interests and concerns about downtown. Okay, so within the next 2 weeks, you should get a call from me to do an interview as well. And thank you all for coming.
Are you doing outreach to downtown businesses?
Oh, yeah.
I want to give you some information on the Brownfields program to take with you.
Yeah, the public involvement process for this includes stakeholder interviews, outreach to the businesses, so that part of that will include direct outreach to the businesses, not necessarily all of them. I don't know that we'll get to talk to every single person, but we'll certainly talk to key businesses. Both of the two breweries, in part because I want to talk to you both about the permit process that you went through and that specific experience. As well as at least 2 public events, and it might be one at the brewery and then we could certainly come to the community picnic, and then maybe later on in the fall, we could do another event at the Marine Park. Yeah.
I'll reach out to you as to what you would like us to share at a Main Street event about this, because there are different things. So I want to be sure that if just to say also, you can contact.
And also the Brigham Fish Market was built in 2014, and then, the real estate office, which is around the bridge now.
Wyndham, yeah.
That was built in 2015, but we own that now, and I think the guy who built it, Jackson Vanderpool, lives across the road.
Jackson Vanderbilt. Do you have his contact information?
I think.
What do you?
I don't know if I do, but he's a real estate agent with Windermere,
So I should be able to find.
so
it.
you could pretend to buy a house and then,
Because I think that's gonna be part of this, is what process do we really look at?
Yeah, with not having any kind of business registry system for the city, we have no clue when businesses pop up in town unless there's a planning need involved, and we have no good way of how to contact them. It's even getting this group together was a pain,
Yeah.
and reaching out to them, so.
Also the Hoykers who own the old fire station, and they also own the coffee shop across the street.
I sent a lot of that with our quarterly report for Main Street. I had property addresses, I mean, contact addresses for owners, but not, he's never responded to my emails, so.
Okay, well, I will follow up with you individually as well, Denise, and talk about Main Street. Our next meeting as a group will probably be until August. So, I will invite you to any events that we are going to hold, as well as be sending you individual information to keep you informed as to how we're moving forward and what we're doing. I have an intern who will be joining this project as of July 1st. Who will be helping me do a lot more of the background information. And then we have a landscape architect, as I said, who's going to be joining for the summer and the fall as well. And so we'll have a much more fleshed out process once we have those two people online. Thank you all very much. This is there's gonna be a lot of work, but I'll try to keep it as light as possible on you. But I really hope that the next time we talk, we can really delve into some of the solutions that we might be able to find for downtown and that are actionable, with the intent of them being directly related to events that are out there that we may be able to access, or work that we can directly do with property owners. So, thanks very much.
Thank you.
you.
Let us know if you're sending folks out, if you're coming out, all of us. We might
Thank
need
you.
to for lunch
Have a
or
good night.
go to, or just, yeah,